Kicking. Rendering. Yeah, guys, that's my favorite part. That's my favorite part of this is the transition. Everybody, well, hello and welcome back to your favorite pandemic podcast. Pencil to pencil, not pencil I pencil like Boys to Men. It's pencil
I.
pencil I pencil. I like that. Brought to you every Wednesday at 8 p.m. By expert
Jamaican broadcast.
By what, Mike?
That's our Jamaican broadcast.
I. It's an I podcast. Brought to you every Wednesday at 8 p.m. by your fine feathered friends and expert cartoonists. I'll start this off. I'll start the chain off. I am JAMAR NICHOLAS. Well, hello. Philadelphia's favorite son and your internet best friend. I have a book coming out next month, Leon the Extraordinary, published by Scholastic Graphix. I'm very excited.
What's the street date?
10-4. We're bringing it back. That's CB language. Somebody, for some reason, I got caught up in watching YouTube clips of truckers. I don't know how this happened.
Truckers smashing?
No, just like the lives of people who drive trucks. Like there's people who vlog out of their trucks or talk about trucking culture. And my uncle, rest his soul, was a trucker, so I know a little bit about this world. It's very interesting. But they said 10-4, good buddy, is a suggestive come on that you shouldn't use unless you're willing to back it up.
What?
Is that wild? I didn't know that.
That song where they're like, "Oh, 10-4, good buddy," was all like,
right. So like 10-4
at the next truck stop.
Yeah. So good buddy.
10-4.
Look at Steve's face. Steve is like, wait, what?
I think is it a math problem? I think I'm just having trouble with the numbers.
So the 10-4 is whatever CB code that is fine, like, over and out, I guess. But the good buddy part is problematic. So we'll just leave that there.
That must be some new.
I think it might be new.
Those are those new truckers.
Y'all new truckers out here messing up the algorithms. I love it. That was an intro. And also, I'm joined by my co-host. Some may call him a modern Marvel of comics. You see, I mixed it up, Mike.
Oh!
I like to call him a full bird colonel of comic book illustration. Salute the colonel. My good buddy, Mike Manley. What's up, Mike Manley?
Hey, everybody.
Mike, what's going on? What's new in the studio?
No, just working on the Phantom right before the show. I got to finish that up and get that in tomorrow, and then finish up the Judge strips. And then I got a couple commissions to keep working on. So.
Oh, you got commissions. I love it.
Yeah, I have a couple outstanding commissions that I have to finish.
Ain't that the way?
All your commissions are outstanding.
Yes.
Oh, I like what you did there. And I would be remiss, my friends, if I did not introduce one of my favorite cartoonists out in the game today. Masterful work he produces. And is your Kickstarter still going? Is that wrapping up?
Yeah.
And Ringo Award nominee.
Yes. Stone Cold, Steve Conley.
Hey, guys.
So, Steve, give a plug for your Kickstarter and tell us what it's about.
Okay, so for folks who don't know who I am, I write and draw the webcomic The Middle Age, but this Kickstarter is kind of a spin-off of The Middle Age. I know I immediately launch into it, Jamar.
No, that's what you're supposed to do.
This Kickstarter is kind of a spin-off of it. It's doing the first Dungeons & Dragons tabletop role-playing game material based on my comic. And it's called Intoximancy. I got the URL. It's intoximancy.com. It'll take you right to the Kickstarter. It's going gangbusters. I'm shocked at how well it's doing.
You were saying you were a little gobsmacked that it's going so well. Why are you surprised, Steve Conley?
I'm an outsider to that world. I mean, I play the game. I speak a bit of the language, but I think this is my first time doing a product, in the tabletop. I mean, I did minis. I sculpted minis, but doing supplement material that is supposed to be rules for the game.
Yeah.
It's very, I wasn't sure if they would welcome me, and so far they have, which is great.
Well, that's something and I won't speak on this too long, but I think it's very interesting that the tabletop gaming community is very vast. And I think when you start talking about that in mixed company, people are very surprised to know that the fandom is so large.
Crazy. It's huge. And I think it's also a thing because they're gamers, they're buying a game. They're just used to paying more than everyone in comics. Someone's got a comic book and they still only 35 cents in their head. And you try to sell it, it's like, this is $3 and they get sticker shock. But gamers are like, oh, $70 for a hardcover? That sounds about right. So
no, some of those hardbacks.
It's generational now. I mean, you've had people playing Dungeons and Dragons since what? Early 70s?
The 70s, right? Yeah,
early 70s. Wasn't that when it was invented, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's when the devil took your soul.
I know, but here we are in 2020, 22, and there's a lot of other things that take your soul.
Souls are in short supply right now.
The marketplace is very crowded these days. So, guys, you know what? I want to just get right to it because I think this is going to be a really fantastic show. I see a lot of new faces in the chat. If you're watching on Facebook, feel free to. What do you do there? You like us, and then you can follow us, right? And then
click our little like button.
And then on YouTube, if you can like us and subscribe and hit that alarm bell so you get updated anytime we do a signpost for a new show. Guys, this is what happens every week on Pencil to Pencil, the creme de la creme of live comic book talk shows. Oh, I love it. I could never learn how to do that, so I'll let you proxy.
That was like that guy, Mr. Zumdish, Fritz Friel, actor. He always.
So let me tell you what's going to happen here. So we're going to bring in a very special guest today, and we're going to have a fly on the wall conversation. Just imagine if you were in the comic book business, or maybe you are, and you get to call a couple of your favorite comic book buddies, and they just chop it up. We just have a conversation. But you get to actually ping in and ask us questions. So it's a really cool space to be in, and who knows what'll come up. But I think you'll really enjoy our guest tonight. So if anybody's been paying attention, comic books are changing, comic strips are changing. Just the industry is always in flux. And, there are people that will tell you that people don't read the newspaper anymore. Do they still make newspapers, Mike Manley?
Well, the Rupert Murdoch got rid of all the comic strips in his newspapers in Australia.
Wow. That's we'll have to talk about that. So
Yeah.
you can see that the landscape is changing. So to hear in 2022 that there are still people creating new content and new comic strips and getting syndication deals is really eye-opening to me. I'm very excited that one of our friends is one of those people. We actually have them here tonight. Tauhid Bondia is going to be with us, and we're going to talk about his career, where he started, where he's going, and what's next for him. So please welcome to Pencil. I had to get the cake ready. Bill's ready for the cake. Oh, let me bring it in. Tauhid Bondia. Woohoo! Look at that. Yo, you were on.
Good to see you there, guys.
he did the turnaround. You were like reading Blondie. Oh,
You're just starting to lose me. It's a good thing you turned me on there finally.
Well, hello.
Well, it's really good to be here.
Thanks, man. Thanks. It's really great to get to talk to you in person, and I hope that you can shed some light on your career and where things are going. It's a very exciting year for you. It sounds like you got a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, really. It's ramping up now. It's very different from the last 20-something years of creating in obscurity.
Oh yeah. Are you getting these type of pings from people is now that your name is out there, you're, as we call it, an overnight success. How's that going for you?
I don't know. You know what? I don't think I get categorized that much as an overnight success, because like part of telling my story is the whole. I've been at it for so long. You know that people always tell my story from the beginning. For some reason, that's much more. Maybe if I was younger, I'd be thought of as an overnight success. But 45, people are like, yeah, he's been at it for a while. This shit finally came in.
Oh wow! So, well, that's cool. I mean, usually what I hear from a lot of people, and I'm going through a little bit of that myself right now, is, you know, like doing appearances or just being in a new space. People are like, "Oh, is this your first book? That's nice. It must be nice to have your first book." Of like, fam, look at all this gray hair.
That's so weird. This is my first book. I've got the book coming out, and everyone assumes that I've been making books this whole time. You know, I've had like 5 or 6 other comic strips that I've done, and this is literally the first book that I've ever made. So,
oh wow,
I'm getting the reverse.
That's exciting. Well, you know, I'll let somebody else ask a question, and then I'll look at the chat to see if anybody has anything to say, and then we'll keep it going.
Well, I don't know if we even said it yet, but the name of the comic is called CRABGRASS, and I think everyone needs to check it out. The art is gorgeous. It's just gorgeous. It's so good.
Coming from me, I appreciate that, Steve.
But it's really great. I really hope everyone checks it out. And also on Instagram, we got this little graphic here, graphic. But so you said you tell your story. When you tell your story, where do you start it? Where is it? Like, I got my first pencil. I got my first
it's just like, how much time you got? People always ask me how I got into comics, and that's just, that begins back in childhood for everybody. I guess the shortest version is how I got into comic strips, and that was basically in my early 20s. I was a member of the Penny Arcade Forum Artist Corner. You guys are probably familiar with it. And that was kind of like art college for me. I didn't actually go to a university. I mean, I went to Murray State for like a semester, but that was like art college for me. That's where I made all my art friends, and we kind of, challenged each other and pushed each other and supported each other. And I'm still in touch with a lot of those people. And in fact, I came up through that forum with Andrew Hussey, who went on to do, Homestuck and things like that. But that's what got me really thinking, okay, I could do comic strips for a living. Up until that point, I was really interested in doing comic books, but I could never finish the thing.
Oh, wow.
It's a long form, and I would do 3 or 4 pages and then get distracted or have a new idea or just get bored with the idea or something like that. And with comic strips, it's just really different. You do 4 panels and you finished a thing, and that gives you the momentum to do 4 more panels. And then next thing you know, you've done 10 or 20 or 100. Just, goes on. It's just a lot easier for me to keep that momentum going with comic strips. And I discovered that at the Penny Arcade forums. And it took me, like I said, like 5 or 6 failed webcomics. I don't want to say failed, because I had to do them in order to get where I am now. It's not good to think of them like that. But they failed. None of them made a dime. None of them made me famous. So, but yeah, they were, there was a lot of growth going on there, and just kind of learning about web development and things like that. So.
Well, and now you said what, 5 or 6? How long a time was that from like you deciding, because you said you want to do comic books? I'm assuming you want to work for like a lot of people, Marvel or DC or something, right? But you must have also liked strips at the same time too. I would imagine.
Sure.
But like, how long would you do like one of the strips for 6 months, and then get another idea, kind of peter around on it? How did that carve out?
The average lifespan of one of my webcomics before CRABGRASS was like 150 to 200 strips. And updating, twice a week, something like that. That would go on for a little while.
Mhm.
And each time I started a new strip, this is the one that's going to make me famous. This is the one that's going to launch my career. And then after 120 or 150 strips, it hadn't done that. It was hard to keep the fire burning. It had a lot more to do with, I think, the choice of material that I was doing my strips about at the time. Early on, I was very much trying to appeal to what I thought was like a built-in audience. I do a Dungeons and Dragons type strip just to like get all those Dungeons and Dragons people. And but I didn't know much about Dungeons and Dragons,
Yeah.
It was just me. Well, I know what an elf is. I know what a dragon looks like. And I'll draw that in a gag strip and people will love it and I'll get famous. But people who enjoy Dungeons and Dragons know when you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, they can smell it.
Yeah. So it never really went anywhere. And I did that a couple of times before I realized that I need to kind of write what I know, which is an oversimplified way of putting it, but just, write things that I actually care about.
Right. But I find that, that's actually a very important, interesting development as an artist, because a lot of young artists, don't have their story figured out before they start. So they start with enthusiasm. That's kind of like, putting nitro in the tank, and you kind of go a little while on that, and then you're like, oh yeah, what happens after that? And then also, and we've talked about it before on the show, in order to produce something for years, like somebody like Charles Schultz or any cartoonist, it has to come from like an authentic place inside where you can sort of trust yourself, because like you said, if you're doing Dungeons and Dragons or what was some of the other subjects? So you tried that.
Oh wow, I did Dungeons and Dragons. I did The Office, but on a spaceship. I did.
So what was that called?
That was called Good Ship Chronicles, and I did the talking heads and everything. I really tried to translate the Office format, mockumentary format, into a comic strip. It failed for a number of reasons, but I thought it was the best idea ever. After that, I did something called The Angry Dead, because around that time The Walking Dead was super popular. So I was going to make a comedy strip about zombies and people dying and getting eaten by zombies, which I don't.
that was one of my favorites.
For fertile ground for comedy. But,
yeah, that was one of my favorites. And we already have a bunch of questions coming in, and there was a really nice testament from our buddy David Peterson. David says Taheed's line work on Crabgrass is fantastic. Chef's kiss. He didn't say chef's kiss. I'm putting words in his mouth.
That's what the two dashes mean.
That's chef's kiss. There's a Jim Borgman film mixed with Anthony Wheeler. High praise, David Peterson. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
I think that especially for the younger members of the audience who are in the beginning stages of their career, realizing that you would put so you're talking like a year on each one of those strips that didn't go where you wanted, right?
Yeah, a year or more, yeah.
Right. And so you're doing 2 strips a week, right? And then, so how much time each week are you spending working on that strip?
I'd call it about a part-time job worth of hours. Actually, a lot of time stolen from my actual job to work on those comic strips. But a lot of
quitting ahead of time, work on your,
or just misappropriating company resources, or staying up late, things like that. A lot of hours.
So I mean, I think that's important because it shows the commitment to the craft, even though it wasn't having the success initially that you wanted, and also the idea of trying to produce, it seems like you're thinking, oh, I want to produce something that appeals to a wide range of.
Yeah. And I mean, I didn't have a choice. Discipline is a very flattering word. I tried to give up so many times. I got so sick of drawing comic strips and not going anywhere with it, and it's just like, I need to go get my degree and, you know, get a real job and get rich and quit, you know, banging my head against this wall. But you know, and that's like I said, I started my early 20s and kept on until now, because I would do a comic strip for a year or two, and then I would go on a hiatus, and that would last a year or two, but I'd always have to come back. Like, I would always reach some point in my headspace or in my life or whatever where there was enough calm. I would look around and I go, I should probably draw a comic now, and then a new idea would come. And it was completely against my will. So it was either this or nothing.
Taheed, I have a couple of questions about the Penny Arcade forums, because we talk a lot on the show about everybody who's come into the business in some shape went through an entry port that closed up immediately after they went through it. But there's the influence of the internet on a lot of creators' early starts is kind of like, I don't know, make a starting block for how you're going to go in. And, you know, we talked about kind of like early internet where it was all forums. And then, you know, once Google showed up, things changed. And that Penny Arcade space was pretty huge at the time, especially knowing that for people who were trying to do webcomics, there weren't a lot of places where they could congregate. I know there was kind of like Keen Spot and some of the early like aggregate stuff, and Steve Conley could speak to that really expertly. So I wondered, being around those Penny Arcade cats and everybody was kind of in the same boat, rowing the same direction, where did you see you wanting to end up? Did you want a really popular webcomic?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I wanted to be Mike and Jerry, or Scott Kurtz. You know, I mean, that was the dream, because I had already assumed that newspaper syndication was off the table. You know, I mean, as a small child reading through Garfield collections, the newspaper comic strip was core to my idea of what comic strips are. But by the time I was in my 20s, that dream I thought was essentially dead. So I still wanted to do comic strips. If I still wanted to do comic strips, it would have to be on the web. And I wanted to do AdSense ads on my site and make six figures like I imagined Scott Kurtz and Penny Arcade did. I wanted to build a studio like they did and throw events and all of that stuff. That was absolutely my dream at the time. And it just kept not happening.
I think it's interesting just to speak on the Penny Arcade cats and our buddy Scott Kurtz for a minute, is that early time of webcomics, there were like 3 or 4 or 5 like pillars of webcomics. And then there was just like a lot of like myths around the bottom of it. And Penny Arcade's still going strong, but I remember telling people while this stuff was happening, I was like, this stuff is huge. And, not that it was still in that place where you kind of had to talk it up because people didn't get it still, but to make a business model out of a webcomic was something that just blew people's minds. And it still kind of hasn't been replicated to the same way that they've done it.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it was such a bad idea to try and base my business model off of such an anomaly. I mean, to this day, like you said, it hasn't been replicated. Nobody else has done what Penny Arcade has done. People have come close. They've had success in other arenas. Certainly people with that longevity. But yeah, there's not another Penny Arcade out there, really.
Well, the internet also has changed so much from that time. Like even the way ads pay off, and I mean that whole thing just so, I mean, because then, you know, it all crashed and burned, and then, you know,
that went away before I got a chance to cash in.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they had built something so enduring that it could survive those collapses, those major cataclysms of like just the idea that ads wouldn't be worth anything anymore. Although I think they did manage to be such fixtures that they managed to hold on to rates that entry people couldn't secure.
Right.
So I think so page views still mattered in a way that for the rest of us, page views stopped mattering because suddenly it no longer mattered how many pages you were seen because it only added up to 10 cents.
Yeah.
Wasn't that? I'm sorry. What wasn't that back when Alexa was something else that wouldn't turn on your stereo? That was like you checking your ranking.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Remember that on the internet. I had another question about that time and space. So Taheed, as you were kind of like basically throwing spaghetti at the wall, like year after year after year, you're also creating kind of like an IP footprint for this stuff, right? Where were you putting this stuff on the web? Did you create new URLs or domains for everything?
Yeah. I was my web development skills drew parallel to my comic creating skills during this time, and having come up during that early penny arcade age, everybody had their own website, and your website had to be slick. And this was before the days of WordPress and things like that. And so
Sure.
if I didn't become a web comic, if I didn't become a cartoonist, I was definitely going to become a web designer, because that's probably the second most thing that I'm passionate about. Like I can totally lose myself in a web design right now if I wanted to. It was just so huge fun for me to develop a new website around a comic. That was like the first probably month of me starting a webcomic. I'd come up with the idea, sketch out some characters, and then I'd spend a month designing a really cool website to look at. And then I'd put one comic on it and launch.
All those people have just the cover of the comic and no interior pages.
Yeah.
So I know we're going to get to the meat and potatoes of why you're here tonight, but also I wonder, do you kind of have, like almost all of us cartoonists have, kind of like a file cabinet or a hard drive with all of this old stuff on it? Do you ever think in the back of your head, hey, I'll get back to that one day? Or is it just in the cemetery now?
I think a cemetery is probably the best word for it.
Like, not a morgue, it's a cemetery.
Yeah, it's not. Look, cemetery is good, because if they ever come back to life, something's gone horribly wrong. Those comics, I like to leave them up. They can be found. If you go to my Instagram, I've got a link tree or something that links to all of the different places. I got a couple of them. I got Spells and Whistles and Good Ship Chronicles on Facebook. I think The Angry Dead is also on Facebook. Problem Like Jamal still has its own site up. So I like to have that, to respect that body of work, even though I can barely stand to look at it. I like to respect that work and the guy that made it, because he got me here. It's definitely a graveyard.
So with that, and I know it's kind of hard to look back sometimes. Yeah. Are you in a place, and I don't want to be grim, where you start kind of thinking about because we're not getting any younger.
Yeah.
Start thinking about your mortality, or kind of like your footprint. Like, do you want to maybe collect all this stuff in some fashion, or is it just go find it on the edges of the internet?
Yeah, I keep, like you said, I've got it where people can find it if they really want to find it. I've also got hard drives with the stuff on it. If I ever decide to put it into a book or whatever, I don't think that a couple of them are going to pass the resolution test, though. They were made almost exclusively for viewing on a monitor back then. But I think as far as the body of work that I want to leave behind, I'm leaning pretty hard on CRABGRASS for that. Like I really, I really want to just like, kind of dedicate myself to this. I've looked at this comic strip from a number of different angles and thought about where I can take it. And, I'm thinking years and years down the line. I'd like to have lots of books and maybe one day a TV show. Who knows? I mean, sky's the limit. But yeah, I think when I die, if that's all I'm remembered for is the guy who made CRABGRASS, then I'll probably be okay with that. I don't need to.
All right, I'm going to turn over to somebody else, but I have so many questions for you. And I hope you're not like, bro, get the CRABGRASS, because we're getting there.
No, it's fine. I love this.
Well, I had one that is tied to that. I do want to get to the origins of CRABGRASS, but this seems like relevant to some of the things that we're just talking about. New regular to our conversation from YouTube, Max Powers Comic asks, when did you know it was time to change the idea?
It's a great question.
I wasn't ever super precious about any idea, and early on, my motivations were so bad that all it really took was the comic strip not making me rich and famous, like within a year or two. Then I would say, okay, well, this isn't working. I'm just going to try something else and throw some more spaghetti at the wall. And like I said, I had to do that a few times before I really started to try and make something that I would value personally and not just something that I thought there was a built-in audience for. But yeah, I think when it's time to change ideas, you'll get a lot of signals from yourself about when it's time to do that. And probably the first of them is asking that question, how do you know when it's time to change ideas? That speaks to a certain, I don't know, like a certain doubt that you might have in the idea that you're already working on.
Right.
When you're working on something and you're wondering, is this stale? Is this something? Should I move on to something else? That might be the beginnings of, yeah, maybe you should.
Absolutely.
It's like, yeah, and it's there's infinite ideas, and all you have is time, and every idea that you work on, you're honing your craft. So it's like, I don't see the point in being super precious about something unless you've signed a contract and you have deadlines every day of the week, and then you're stuck and you can never go anywhere.
There was a couple of things. Hold on, that to me nice. Our good buddy David Peterson, read Mouse Guard. Going back to that thing about webcomics, he had some really interesting things to add. He said the hugest thing about webcomics was removal of gatekeeping. Cut your teeth on storytelling while trying to build an audience. And
Amen.
Also, obviously, that doesn't cover monetization. That was still in a Wild West stage, but at least you could practice, try, fail, get fans, etc., with no one holding you up. Thanks for that, David. So so going to that space in your head, where you're like, I'm doing this. It's not, my gut isn't feeling like this is it, because I'm sure when it's it. It's kind of like you feel something in your belly. Was there ever a point, because I know as you kept going, you probably had fans who were connected to one strip, or then you had people that followed you across different strips. Did you ever have kind of like a vocal fan base who was like, no, don't quit, this is dope, don't do it, don't leave, and you're like, nah, I gotta go? Did you ever have any conflicts like that, or were you kind of had to like disbelieve what your fans were telling you?
I had that vocal fan base, but they existed entirely in my head. Like, like when I would have a lot of guilt when I would, put a comic strip on hiatus. In fact, every single time I would go, it's going on hiatus. It'll be back. I just need to take some time away, and then it would just turn to forever. But I never actually had a fan go, no, don't. You have to keep pushing through. They were supporting me, and that's one wonderful thing about the internet is, and webcomics, is that the creator just as often gets the support as much as the the comic strip does.
Yeah,
And so it
that's a
was like,
really good
whatever,
point.
just whatever you got to do. They said, just whatever you got to do, just keep creating. You know, we'll be here for you. And they always were. It was like 200 people. So like for years and years, it was like the same 200 people, 200 friends that I had on the Penny Arcade forums. It was a long time before it was more than that, anyways.
You know, I think that's a really interesting point to go back to, kind of like the, I don't know, the primordial soup of webcomics, back where it was like, hey guys, you know, I had to go to the dentist and I had to get a root canal. Sorry, no strip this week.
Yeah.
And your fan base would go, oh, that's cool. You take care of yourself. We'll see you next time. Which is not a world that Mike Manley came from. You know what I mean? So, like, maybe maybe there's kind of like, I don't know, another lane opens up where now there's care being given to the creator versus the product that we hadn't seen before that.
Yeah, I think that that's a good sentiment. That's back then. That was definitely a great time to come up in comics, because it was very much an atmosphere of support. You know, I got support from the Penny Arcade forums. My readers that I had were super supportive. You could really do no wrong. I mean, unless you just put horrible things into your comic and did terrible things to your characters, you really could do no wrong. And every one of us was super stressed out about missing an update. You know, we all thought, if I miss too many in a row, they're all just going to go away and never come back. Like any minute now, it's going to happen. And that was never true. I think outgrowing that was kind of part of the process of developing as a cartoonist. And now it's the case where, you know, I update almost exclusively on social media platforms. And I can update every single day. And I got 150,000 followers on Instagram, and 150,000 people don't get my comic every day. You know, 10 or 15,000 people might get that day's comic. And it doesn't matter, because they've all got 80 comic strips running through their feed. You know, they might, even if they get served your comic, they're probably going to miss it anyways. So there's not the need to update super regular like there once was, and there really wasn't back then. It was just our fear and insecurity,
like a guilt thing. Huh.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
But everybody believed it. It was just everyone, and everyone repeated it. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know anybody that it ever happened to, but we were all definitely afraid of it, and it makes even less sense now. So, but yeah, which is weird, because now with the syndication, I find myself updating more than I ever have. Like I said, in my previous comics, 2-3 times a week, and now I'm doing 7 comic strips a week, and one of them is double sized every week forever.
Ever?
Yeah, best case scenario, which is an interesting challenge. It has been an interesting challenge.
Mike, maybe you can dance with this for a while. I mean, just being in that fraternity of comic strip artists, right, where the grind is just almost kind of hard to fathom, that, you know, there's basically no end to this. I'm not trying to freak anybody out who's watching, but it's like you're signing on.
It never ends.
Does I eat or sleep or feel?
You know what? You know, that was a big problem for me when the comic strip first went into development. It was essentially a webcomic. The plan was always to pitch it to my contact at Andrews McMeel and go for newspaper syndication. But I was doing 2 or 3 comics a week initially. My same old webcomic pace. Over the course of development, I had to slowly ramp that up and kind of see, what my workflow was going to be like, if I even had the chops. Like, you really don't know if you can do that until you do it.
Until you do it, yeah.
Yeah, and you don't die. So,
right.
But yeah, I had no idea, and I was scared to death. But what I've learned, probably more than anything, is that you have to completely let go of the idea. I can say it in jest, but you have to completely let go of the idea that it's this unattainable deadline that goes on every day forever, which it is. But also, that's future Taheed's problem. Screw that guy. Like, it's Monday. I'm going to do 7 comic strips. I'm going to get to the weekend and I'm going to relax. And next week's Taheed can do his 7 comic strips. And with that mentality, just thinking those next 7 comic strips, I have no problem at all producing, you know, and I can overproduce even when I need to, because it's just, you only think as far as the next, you know, little batch of comics. If I sat here, I could paralyze myself with anxiety thinking about, well, what if I miss? What if I get really sick or have a car accident or something like that and I miss? And it's that same kind of, comes from that same kind of place. If I miss updates, it's all going to fall apart. It's all going to go away. It's all fiction. And I don't need to give it any headspace. So I just quit doing that. And I've gotten a lot more productive because of it.
I think one of the things about comic strips as opposed to comic books, in my experience, is that, you know, you do a comic, even if the deadline was bad, you always had a little, you had a few days before you'd have to do the next issue, right? You'd have maybe sometimes a week, right? Even if you're doing a monthly. With comic strips, no, if I was just doing one, I would probably have 3 days a week I could take off. But now I realize it really comes down, in my opinion, to you have to sort of have the personality for it, right? Because if you don't have the personality for it, that means you don't really enjoy it. And then that means, like, it's like, what does it say? You know, don't get off the horse. If you get off the horse and you rest, get back on the horse, like, oh man, you're like sore, everything hurts. And I really think that the people who are successful at doing comics or comic strips, especially strips, have that personality that allows them to do it, right? Because there's a lot of people who could do it for a month, you know, or like you were saying earlier, you know, you would do it for a year or two, and your personality was such that even though you would get discouraged and go to the next thing, you didn't stop. You would you'd reset and go forward. Some people get really discouraged and then that's it. They can't, you know, they can't go forward. And I think when I teach and I meet students, you know, I'm pretty good now at being able to tell, like, this person has a personality for it. Not the ability. The person has the ability, but not the personality.
Yeah.
Right. You know, and so sometimes if you can team those people up, maybe that person couldn't draw the strip, but they could write the strip. And the other person could draw the strip, but they couldn't write the strip. Right. I mean, one of the things about, like, you had 3 categories of strip. You had the legacy strip, which is what I do. I don't write it. Then you had something like Peanuts, which was written and drawn by the same person. And then you had other strips that were written by one person and drawn by another person. So each person's sort of sharing the load a little bit, you know. And then, of course, I think I'm not as up on webcomics as you guys are. So I don't know if that's as prevalent in webcomics or if it's more the solo creator, you know, like you, where you're writing and you're drawing. And the one thing about that is that you can sort of work to your strengths. You can go like, I really don't want to draw a bunch of city streets with cars and whatever. I'm not going to write that, right? Where you don't get that if you're, you know, I have to draw whatever the writers say. Now, usually, you know, like it's, especially in the case of the Phantom, Tony's good at knowing what we talk, right? So he sort of, I feel, writes to my strength as an artist.
Yeah. I've been in collaboration situations, and you know, it is sort of a double-edged sword. I've had writers that just sort of disregard the fact that somebody's going to have to draw what they're writing when they're writing, and that while that can be frustrating, at the same time, it it has pushed me way outside my comfort zone, and I've, you know, had great success and surprised myself with that. It still doesn't leave me wanting super excited about doing a collaboration in the future, but yeah, that can happen. But I sort of take that lesson and apply it to my own writing. So occasionally when I'm writing, I'll just have my writer's hat on and I won't think about what it's like, what it's going to be like to draw this. You know, if I just have a really good idea, then I will just commit to the idea and I will write it the way I imagine it would be best executed. And then I will leave drawing up to future Taheed, and he'll just figure it out somehow. And so that's a way that I managed to still challenge myself, even though I'm not working in collaboration with anybody. And it's essential because stagnation wants to loom its ugly head, you know, all the time, especially when you have this daily deadline.
Freudian slip, right?
Yeah, when you have this daily deadline, there's a strong instinct to just crank it out, you know, and you can't work at a 10 all the time, and you a lot of times want to just feel like, well, you know what, if I can just manage a 7.5 every day, then I'll be fine. But then the 7.5 becomes your 10, and now you have a problem. So you have to find ways to be able to challenge yourself and don't just like slip into just sort of rote cranking out comic strips because you're catering to a deadline. And trust yourself that you're going to be able to produce, even if some days you work 12 hours and other days you only work 2.5.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Now, I also wanted to talk a little bit about your technical process, how that changed from the beginning. Were you drawing on paper and then inking it and scanning it, and then how that's changed to how you're working now? Because one of the things now is everybody, you know, it seems like most web cartoonists, maybe I'm wrong, but it seems that they're doing this stuff in like Clip Studio or Photoshop. They're not actually drawing it on paper and then scanning it in, and then, you know.
Yeah, no, I used to draw it on just like regular printer paper with a regular big mechanical pencil and some Micron pens and Sharpies for my first webcomic, and then I would scan it in to Photoshop, the lines, and then do all the coloring and cleaning up in Photoshop. And by the time I started my second webcomic, or maybe by the time I finished Spells and Whistles, I had my first drawing tablet, and then I just never looked back. I don't own a pen. Like the other day, I had to pay a guy for mowing my lawn, and I'm turning the house upside down looking for a pen to sign a check with, because I literally don't own a pen. And I've got some printer paper in my printer, but that's it. I don't have like reams of tag board like I used to have, things like that. So, and now I've since then graduated to the drawing monitors.
Like a Cintiq or something like that.
Yeah, like a Cintiq. That's what I use now, the Cintiq Pro. Right before that, I was using the iPad Pro. Still a fantastic machine. And if I like go on vacation and I need to crank out a comic strip, I can still use that.
Vacation.
Yeah.
If I ever go on a vacation, I guess.
That's when the assistant, you know, you just doodle some heads. The assistant has to fill everything else in, you know.
Assistant. Oh, nice. We dream big over here. Vacations, assistants.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have an assistant for my stuff, and that's a subject that often comes up. Is the traditional comic strip artists always had, most of them, you know, from Dick Brown to, I don't think Schultz had an assistant. He probably had a secretary or whatever. But those guys, especially the guys who did the more like realistic strips, or even supposedly with Stan Drake, when he quit doing Julia Jones, he took over Blondie and then he had an assistant do the backgrounds. And Blondie was still in like 2,000 papers or something at one point. I mean, just like massive circulation. And I heard, I don't know if this is true, but I heard that his assistant made $70,000 a year just inking backgrounds, just doing the backgrounds on Blondie.
I would gladly pay someone that to draw backgrounds, so that I wouldn't have to. If I had that to just throw away at somebody, I would 100% pay someone $70,000 a year to draw backgrounds.
Really?
Backgrounds, yes, they're the bane of my existence. And
Jim Davis has like a whole. He has like a whole plant of people, right? Like doing Garfield, right?
I think that's what it used to be. I don't know if it's still the same setup.
Like you had an airplane, like that's what you want. Like has your crew on it, and you go like, okay, we're gonna fly to Tahiti this week and work on our iPads on the beach.
I love it. But yes, I mean, to that question, have you? It seems like you have a really good rhythm to how you produce work. Do you feel like you could use another set of hands? And before I finish asking the question, there's also different types of assistants, and I've talked about this with Mike a lot. You can maybe you just need somebody to do the invoices, which could also be an assistant. Yeah. You know what I mean? So have you ever felt like you could use another pair of hands, or is that something that's like alien to you?
I think that one day I will. Right now I'm too neurotic. Like I don't trust anybody else to do anything that has to do with my comic strip. Now I could easily shop out, you know, some aspect of actually even creating the strip, let alone with any of the administrative stuff. But yeah, I'm still in the early stages of the growth of this strip, and I'm doing everything I can to maintain its momentum and, you know, committed to success. And the irrational, anxious part of my brain feels like I'm the only one that can do it. Like any other person involved is going to slow it down or take it down the wrong, you know, direction or something like that. I'm the only one that can do it.
It is a learning curve for you. I can say that because I've had several assistants over the years.
Sure. Yeah. Eventually I'm going to learn. I'm going to learn better than that. I'm going to learn that, yeah, it's, you know what, actually anybody could do this, and my time is better used doing this XYZ. So, but right now it's just in this moment, the thing is so new, and this is my first experience with something this successful. I want to be deeply involved in every aspect of it personally to make sure it's steered in the right direction until I learn to lighten the hell up.
Right. Well, actually, one of the interesting things too sometimes about using an assistant, and they're usually always someone that's younger than you, is they all not only do they offer their drawing muscle or assistance, but they also sometimes offer technical things and also a different perception of a person who's from another generation coming into this, which I also find valuable.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. And it's like, and that's one of the things that I always found positive about collaboration. I've never, or rarely have I written as well as I do working in a team. You know, just having two heads working on a project writing, it's just, you know, things are better by a factor of 10. Just having someone to bounce it off of, and you can practice bouncing things off of yourself, sort of, and giving yourself time to grow the joke and develop it, or the story or whatever. But it's just, it comes so much easier when you're working in collaboration with someone else. But I don't trust other people to do stuff, and so those two kind of notions butt up against each other, and I end up just, you know, working myself to death. Probably more on the writing side of things than the art side of things. The art side is simple.
Right. Well, I think it's also, we can back up a little bit and talk about, like, say after your 5th strip and getting into CRABGRASS. Also, maybe you can talk about your editorial process the feedback that you were getting, because traditionally, if you wanted to get into doing a strip, you did like a month's worth of dailies and a month's worth of Sundays, and you sent them into the syndicate, and they looked at them and they said, "Oh yeah, well, sorry, we've got too many dog strips, or we've got too many talking turtle strips, or whatever." But then you would also, and this is especially even like 13 years ago when I started Judge Parker, you got a little bit more feedback from editorial, because editorial would read your script and go yes or no, or this is too violent, or this is too racy, or whatever. Can you talk about your, because when you're doing a webcomic, you're the editor, you're the alpha and the omega, you do everything. But now if you're doing something for a syndicate, they have input, like even like on the name and things like that.
Yeah, that was the notion that I had going into it, and embraced myself for, just kind of allowing that sort of creative control on the part of the syndicate, but it never really materialized. I was working with Sheena Wolf from day one when she offered me the deal. We went into, like I said, we went into development for like 2.5 years, and that whole time it was, I would do a batch of comics, I would send her the comics, she would send me notes, mostly grammatical. I don't know how to use a comma at all. And occasionally she would like suggest better wording for a punchline, something that was just eluding me, and I kind of put the place filler in there, and she's like, what about this? And she's really good at that. And then if I was like totally off the mark on something, then like, and we're talking about like tone deaf, I think I did a comic strip where, it was one of the first story arcs where Kevin and Miles get lost in the woods and looking for treasure, and Miles' mom Donna is flipping out and losing it, trying to find her son, and no one else is that worried because they're just kids and they probably just lost track of time, and it's not even dark out yet. And in the last panel, you see someone who looks like they work in a grocery store on the phone saying, no, man, we just sell the milk. We can't put anyone's face on the side of it. And that was the joke that I landed on. But initially, I think I had her actually talking to a police officer. And it was at a time where, this was around like George Floyd and things like that. There was just the whole, there was this black woman and then there was this police officer, and just like optically, it just kind of left a bad taste in your mouth. And it was just one strip, and I hadn't even considered that, because when I do the strip, like I said, I throw my mind back to the 80s,
Right.
And I sent that to her, and she just gave me that little note, like, I don't know about this. And I was really thankful that she did. I was able to change it. But that's only happened, really, I can count on one, maybe two hands, the number of times that's happened in a couple of years now. So yeah, I've been waiting for them to just like really like bring the hammer down and be like, look, this isn't going to work. We need to change the name of this. This character needs to be a girl. And it just never really happened. They've kind of given me the sort of creative freedom to like take some chances even. One time one thing about my webcomic experience that kind of translated over into the syndication experience was whenever I was drawing a webcomic, there was always a period, probably shortly before I went on hiatus, where I would go through and redesign all the characters. Like this comic strip was not paying my bills. I wasn't beholden to anyone. I didn't have any contract signed. If I got tired of the way the characters look, I'm going to change them. So I give everyone the heads up, and then in the next episode, the characters would look drastically different. And I'd have a little more fun with that for a few more months. And I got that itch on CRABGRASS. And one weekend, I just decided I hated the way that the characters looked, that I had really screwed up in the character design. I rushed it. And I wanted to go back and kind of take my time with it. And now knowing what their personalities are, make the designs look like them. And I just like, you know, kind of meticulously came up with these new character designs, corrected some of the problems that I ran into, like with they've got the big dinner plate eyes, the placement of the eyes and the nose. Don't leave much room for the mouth, so it's hard to be expressive. So I wanted to go back and correct that. And they ended up looking pretty drastically different. And I told Sheena, I was like, hey, check this out. I redesigned the characters. I want to launch the characters looking like this. And she told me in the most diplomatic way possible, what the hell are you doing? Like this, I hate this. This is terrible. She didn't say that, but she was like, okay, I can understand the impulse to want to do this. Tell you what, why don't you draw a few strips and see how you feel about it? And it just was kind of like, she kept putting me off, like, you know, we'll give it another and tell me how you feel about it. And eventually I did come to the point where I was like, you know what, she's right. Like, this doesn't look right. And I missed the old designs, and I actually went back to the original designs. But I still got, like, I don't know if I can share an image now. Are we set up to do that still?
Sure. Yeah, you just have to go into on your screen, there should be a thing that says share on the dock.
It's usually at the bottom.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then you have to tell it what exactly you want to share. So there's another prompt.
Is it like open a folder for me to, or is it just like share one of my screens?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Just share your screen thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so I got to get it up on the screen first.
Yeah.
Okay, give me a second here.
And while you're doing that, I'll tap dance. Everybody, thanks so much for joining us tonight. We're having a very lively discussion. We're going to try to do a hard stop at 9:30 EST. So, and there's a lot of questions in the chat I'm going to try to get to. I'm very enthused by the response we're getting tonight. So that's fantastic. Thank you.
I got two screens here.
Okay.
And Leon the Extraordinary is available in finer bookstores everywhere on October 4th.
Don't say good, buddy. And there should be, tell you, there should be a thing when you're ready, like there should be like a share thing to click on your screen, and then I'll see it. Right now, I'm not seeing anything.
Well, it's weird. I'm getting another screen, but it's blank. Well, I've got the image opened up in. Oh, wait, here we go. Let's see. No, I think that's just us. Yeah. Okay. This is asking me to do other stuff. Never mind.
Yeah, we'll leave it. It's all right. You can use the theater of the mind.
Yeah.
To get us there.
It was an awesome idea that I had that my editor didn't agree with, and so no one will ever get to see these beautiful.
Well, you know, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because if you look at Peanuts, he really did change the way the characters look from the early characters to the mid '60s to the sort of shaky style he had at the end. You know what I mean? And it happens so gradually that you
that drift.
Right, yeah, you don't notice that, and that's the other thing about drawing a character. It's like you've drawn them 50 times, okay, then you draw them 1,000 times. You know what I mean? You draw that character so that you, like, it's one thing if a character exists as a drawing or a design, and it's another thing if a character exists in your mind. Like if I say Bugs Bunny or Homer Simpson, you think of that character as a real person, not just a drawing, but like an actual personality. Just like if you said Woody Allen or Sean Connery or Harrison Ford, you think of those cartoon characters as fully formed people. And I think one of the things I noticed about doing, you say something like Judge Parker, is that like those characters are in my head now. The first couple years, you know what I mean? I'd look at reference, you sort of figuring things out, and especially on a legacy strip, where you're sort of following somebody else. The man actually, even in my case, asked me to sort of imitate the previous person. Right. But you're creating something yourself, but it's still going to change no matter what over time, right? Yeah. If you're doing it 10 years from now, there's going to be changes to it.
Right. And that's fine. You know, that's natural. That's part of it. It's one of my favorite things about it, that sort of artistic drift that happens. Like, I work digitally, and I have templates for everything. You know, I have model templates for everything, for all the characters' faces and things like that. I draw over them. I don't trace them. You know, they're sort of there to keep the proportions the same throughout, but they're very loose and allow for me to make those mistakes that I end up keeping, that sort of change the character over time and things like that. So it's just, it's always been difficult for me to just kind of eyeball a character and draw them similarly over and over and over again. So I learned very early on that I need some kind of template or built-in reference to work from. But yeah, even then I still end up, you know, the character design ends up evolving over time. Kevin still ends up looking drastically different than he did in the first few strips, even without, you know, deciding to toss the entire character design and start from scratch.
I find that to be an interesting thing, because you look at Calvin and Hobbes, he really, you know, certain cartoonists really stretch their models. Mm-hmm. Other cartoonists are very
rigid, yeah.
Rigid. And it was a term I learned from doing storyboards, because certain guys like Gendy Tartakovsky or like Bruce Timm, they would say, well, whatever that guy draws, because he's the creator of the show, that's on model. So if it's off model, it's still on model, because, you know, and if you would look at something, I remember like Gendy, who does, you know, really cool cartoony style, he really pushed the stuff. And then seeing how Bruce pushed his designs over the course of several years on the show, so it's just something you become aware of, because when you look at a long body of work like Schultz, or I don't know, like even Beetle Bailey looks a little different than he did. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's unavoidable.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure if you go do something like you look at Bone from the beginning to the end,
absolutely. Yeah.
You know,
absolutely.
I have a bunch of technical questions in the chat, and they're idling in the garage. I want to open the door so nobody dies here. What should I do first? Okay, so here's one that is about your production, and I also have a question for you about your buffer, and we could talk about that.
Yeah.
A good friend Gar says, did Taheed already break down his average day? Came in a little late. Do you write for X hours a day, draw for X hours? Can you talk about your kind of maybe your weekly production? And you kind of touched on that a little bit earlier.
Yeah. My schedule, which is basically just a strong suggestion, I got from Steens, who does Heart of the City.
Yeah.
They work, and I think this might be, you know, a pretty widely used schedule. I do, on Monday I write that week's strips, so it's a very light day, depending on whether I'm doing a story arc or not, and I can come back to that. On Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, I draw the 4-panel daily strips, 2 strips a day. And then on Friday, I do a Sunday, and then I have Saturday and Sunday off. And like, once again, if I'm working on a story arc, I kind of have Monday off, because those just write themselves. Like, I've already thought of the joke. Kevin and Miles get lost at the water park. Hilarious. Now the storyteller, the kids will tell me the story as I'm writing it. You know, that's very easy to bang out 7 strips in a story arc. If I am on one-offs and it's a different joke every day, that's a full day's work trying to come up with 7 comic strips on a Monday, just sitting there staring at my screen, clenching whatever muscle it is you clench to crap out an idea, and then refining and refining. That week I only get 2 days off. But yeah, it's writing on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I draw the dailies, and then Friday I draw the Sundays, and Saturday, Sunday off.
And does that kind of stretch into the evening? Like, are you kind of starting in the morning and working into the evening?
Hours, like 9 to 3?
Yeah, see, that's one of the reasons that I got into this was so that I could set my own hours and have the ideal day. And I ended up somehow working a crappy second shift job because my sleep patterns are so bad. Like I on a good week, I'll get up at like 6 or something, like whenever my dogs need me to get up, and I'll stay up and I'll have a cup of coffee and I will get my work done probably by lunch. If it's like a 2 daily day or something, you know, or a Sunday day. I can get my work done by lunch if I get up at the crack of dawn and I'm feeling great. Most days I don't do that. Most days I get up at like 10:30.
Yeah.
And because I stayed up too late the night before.
Yeah.
And I drag my butt in here, and I have to turn off all the distractions and the TikTok and all that stuff, and then I'll start working, and I'll probably get out of my office like finished 6 o'clock. Because it's just like when I start late like that, it's a lot harder to chip away, and it just all kinds of other things are happening at the same time. I have to keep getting up and coming back, and it's just and I have to remember that and use that as motivation to get up early, because that's too many days like that in a week, and I really just I get burnt out at the end of the week.
So do you feel like, and this is something that I talk about a lot with the fellas about the need to pull all-nighters at this point? Like, you don't need to be pulling all-nighters if you can help it, right? No. The only thing that'll keep me up is something that I'm super excited about. If I'm working on something I'm really surprising myself with the art with, or I'm just really into, I might look up and it's like 2 o'clock in the morning. That'll happen sometimes. But yeah, there is no I can't go to bed before I finish this because everything will fall apart anymore. I'm not doing that to myself. And my question is, if you can speak to it, do you try to keep a buffer, or if you're doing a constant, X strips a week, like a full week every week, or is there a point where you're kind of like getting ahead by a month, or is there like a hustle period that you try to work towards?
Well, when we were doing the development of the strip, that was years of backlogs of strips. Now, not all of them will make it into newspapers, but still several months of buffer is what we started with. Sure. And I am blowing it. I am totally burning through that buffer, and it's not a good thing. It's I don't know what it looks like when I go back and try to rebuild that buffer, but I'm taking some comfort in knowing that many of my other syndication friends are like, yeah, I haven't had a buffer in years and years.
Yeah. I just think that's a common problem. Because part of it is like, if you take 2 days off, or you go away for the weekend, or just that day, I don't know, you got a plumber's there or something, whatever. It's just, I think everybody has that. I mean, I don't know, maybe the guy who draws like Wizard of Id or something can sit down and like draw. Like if you have a really simple style, you might, and you're not writing it, you're just drawing it. Maybe you can draw 3 weeks of Wizard of Id in a week. I don't know. You know what I mean? Yeah. But
I don't know where I would fit in the extra.
Right.
The extra
where's that coming from? Right.
Yeah, I don't know where I would fit in the extra if I have to make up a day, I don't know a good place in my week to stick that. I could stick it in on my writing day, but I need that. I need that time off to, kind of maintain my level of quality and just like, my mental health and things like that. I don't want to get to the point where I'm, burning the candle at both ends. It's just there's no comfortable place for me to work over to catch up. Now, if I ever get to the point where I don't have months of buffer, you know, and I'm like down to the wire and it's actually days, then the sense of urgency might kick in, and that might inspire me to work over. I mean, we'll always have that to rely on. But right now, it's the idea of being behind is so abstract and in the future that it can inspire me to work over and double up and do 3 or 4 strips a day instead of just 2 right now. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm conscious of the buffer shrinking. That's all it does. Is shrink.
Hey, we're getting old. So.
Well, yeah. You know, in the old days, deadlines are based upon the fact that, you know, you would draw your 13-week story or your, you know, 2 months worth of comics. You would send it into the syndicate, and then they would do all their production and everything, you know. Mm-hmm. But now everybody delivers everything digital. So yeah. It's ironic because in some ways they still have that. I think they wanted you to be 8 weeks at King Features. Yeah. They wanted you to be 8 weeks, at least 8 weeks on the Sundays. And I think only 2 or 3 times in the entire time I was working I was 8 weeks ahead on the dailies. Mm-hmm. I think I was probably just doing 1 strip. I could probably get back there. I'm far enough ahead on the Sundays, but yeah, because they would but they're still running on that mm-hmm. paper.
Yeah,
not digital. Even though I still work on paper, mm-hmm. They, you know, nobody's touching paper anymore. You know, I don't think anybody is sending in because they don't have a bullpen anymore. You know mm-hmm. what I mean? So, yeah, you know, and then I think Gary Trudeau was he's always right on the edge because since his stuff is political commentary,
right?
He's trying to always stay current with whatever, you know, is going on. So,
well, yeah, I think too that having too much of a buffer can be a problem for writing. When you know that it's going to be so far out before anyone actually sees what you're doing, I think it can affect your quality. You know, when you're like, this joke isn't quite there, the story isn't quite there, whatever. I've got months and months and months to correct it. You know, I'm gonna call it done for now, move on to the next thing or whatever, and then things will slip through the cracks. You know, it helps to be a little bit closer to the deadline and feel that urgency. But for my part, I end up I edit things right up to the point that they go live anyways. So it's like there's really no point in having the buffer. I will go 3 or 4 months back and look at comic strips and change it real quick before.
Oh, really? You go back and edit it?
Yeah. Yeah. If I know that if I know that it's not in the queue already to just go live, the production team hasn't already got it, you know, uploaded to their space, then I'll go back and change stuff, correct a mistake, or just you know, I didn't like the length of that arm. I've never really sat right with me. I'm going to go back and fix that real quick.
I want to ask quickly, because I think this might have gotten lost in the sauce. Your deal also includes, besides the web, you have newspaper syndication. Yes. Also, right? Can you speak to how that is going, or how you're processing that part of this deal, or even just does that make you feel, I guess, different than if it was just like a Go Comics?
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah. I'm better. Then I have no. I'm
you're better.
No, you're gonna cut all of this and just have that. Just saying I'm better. No, I mean, that was the dream. So when I had a problem like Jamal on Go Comics. I think Sheena contacted me out of the blue about that one. I had no thoughts about putting that on Go Comics, and she's, you know, hey, do you want to put this on Go Comics? I'm like, yeah, sure, sounds great. Now, I celebrated and everything. It was great. But when she actually offered me the deal for CRABGRASS, what had happened was, by that time I'd had a problem like Jamal on Go Comics for almost a year, I think. And then I came up with CRABGRASS. I put together like 4 weeks of strips, I think, maybe less. And I sent them directly to Sheena with like a little note, like, hey, I don't know if I'm abusing this relationship or whatever, but I'm making this comic strip with an eye towards newspaper syndication. Just wanted to see what you thought. And she said, can you send me a couple more weeks so I can get a better idea of the world? And I did that. And she said, do you have time for a call? And yeah, okay, well, sure. And then she offered me a print deal, and it was so weird. It's so hard for me to articulate what happened in my brain. I didn't get it. I didn't get what she was saying. Like, I thought, okay, she wants to put this on Go Comics, and maybe it's like another tier of Go Comics or something where I get like more ad revenue or something. I don't know. But she offered me the deal, and I was like, yeah, that sounds great. She was okay. We'll send you some contracts, have your lawyers look at them. And I'm like, all right, cool. New contracts for Go Comics. And I got off the phone with her, and I thought, did she say print deal? So I messaged her back, and I was like, just to be clear, was this a print deal like for newspapers? She's like, yeah, dude, it's for newspapers. She's like, if I wanted to put it on Go Comics, I would have just emailed you or something. And so that's when I like hit the ceiling, like, and it just like totally, because that was like I said, this was for me the formative definition of what a cartoonist is. That guy that does comic strips in the newspaper, or does illustrations in magazines. Yeah. I'm old enough that's like, that's what a cartoonist is. Yeah. Right. And I had long since given up on that dream, and now here it was, even in the act of, hey, I'm going to try and get this syndicated, it still felt like it fell into my lap. This situation that I had striven for and was actively pursuing, I still wasn't prepared for success when it happened. And so she offered it to me. And I forget what the initial question was now.
Well, just like, just processing that. And
yeah, so yeah, it's that is the huge deal. Like when I'm talking about CRABGRASS, that's the huge deal. And I know that everybody doesn't get it. People don't read newspapers necessarily as much as they used to. There aren't as many newspapers as there used to be. There's never going to be another Calvin and Hobbes or Jim Davis or anything like that. And there is a little bit of a feeling of being like the last guy through the door. But if you talk to the last few syndicated cartoonists, they all felt like the last guy through the door. The door never quite seems to close. And while it's probably not possible to get rich off of newspaper syndication, there's also books, and there's web syndication and things like this. And these syndicates are not just sitting around waiting to die. Right. They're still agile. They're still trying to remain relevant. There's a lot of people, I've found, the people that I've worked with, a lot of young people at the helms of some of these things, departments that I've had to work with, some very forward-thinking people. So it's a pretty hopeful situation to be in, counterintuitively. We launched in 70 newspapers, which really just doesn't sound like much, but it's a lot for nowadays. And then I just got a call last week from Sheena, and we got 70 more newspapers. So now we're at 140 launch, which is huge, and so I'm like easily making a living off of this, which was the goal to begin with. I never needed to be rich, but eventually I'll have 2 books out, and then 3 and 4, and that's, I think, a nice little career. And I think it's probably what a lot of people imagine when they decide I want to be a cartoonist. Yeah, if you're striving to be Jim Davis or somebody like that, then yeah, you need to take a different route. That doesn't happen here anymore. But if you just want to make cartoons and have that be your living, and that's your passion, then it's still totally doable. It's probably more rare, but it's definitely
You wouldn't even believe it when you're offered. You'll be
yes,
like, no.
exactly. I was like, I wasn't even sure it happened to me.
Right.
Well. You know what? I hate this phrase, and I don't even know why I'm bringing it up.
Mhm.
But you and maybe a very few people, what they call it, a blessing of unicorns.
What?
That's like a herd of unicorns. A blessing is that these things are so rare that it's almost hard for us to believe it. Also, you know what I mean? And I feel like that newspaper part is such a really fantastic component.
Well, because there's a lot of resistance on the part. We were just talking about this recently, because we were saying how News Corp dropped all the newspaper strips in Australia out of their papers, and there's a big resistance in some papers to having newspapers. They would rather run tire ads, and they'd rather run advertising. But the fact is, the people who buy newspapers want features. And if you take Irma Baum out, and you take Dear Abby out, and you take the comic strips out, most newspapers don't have deep reporting teams like the Washington Post or something. So by the time you get the news, you've already seen it on the web or Twitter. So what are you offering people if you're not offering them features?
Right.
Don't touch my Sudoku.
Right. I know that every year or two, they would run those things like, well, which strips should we drop? Should we drop Zippy? Should we drop Judge Parker? Should we drop Peanuts? Right. And the thing is, you may not like 99% of the strips. You may only like one strip, but every strip is somebody's favorite strip. Yep. And when they say we're going to take out, Zippy the Pinhead, people write in and they go, no, don't take out Zippy the Pinhead.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think, in my time in the syndicate, they've only launched, literally a handful of strips in a decade.
Yeah.
And a couple of them they launched didn't make it because they just couldn't get that extra, if you can get 100 papers, you can start making a livable wage. If you get 100, 300, 400, you can make good money.
I'll tell you what, try launching a strip during a pandemic.
Oh yeah.
We had to push our launch back because of it. Because apparently, it was I didn't have super high hopes for the numbers that we were going to pull down. I would have been happy with like 30 or 40 papers, and then just like try to grow from there, And I think that's what it felt like we were shooting for. I think 25 was the number where they were like, we can sell the 25 papers. We're going to go ahead with launch, because they were having a lot of trouble kind of getting in touch with the people. People were working from home, things like that. All this COVID stuff was going on. A lot of the sales is still like, people meeting in person and taking meetings and calls and things like that. It's relationships. And those guys were taking a hit during the pandemic and couldn't do their jobs as well. And it came down to it, right down to the wire. They're like, we're just gonna push the launch. And that, of course, to me was very dismaying.
Yeah.
I thought, this is my fault. I haven't made a good enough comic. They can't sell it. They're trying. These are pros. They know what they're doing. I haven't made a good enough comic strip, and this is as far as I get. And a lot of stories go like that. And I thought, okay, well, that'll just be my story. It'll be, I can tell people, hey, I got a syndication deal. Didn't quite make it, but they pushed the launch a month, and I think like a week before launch, Sheena called me with the head of sales and told me that they had like 68 newspapers or something. I would have settled for, like I said, 25 or 30 at the time, pie in the sky dream was like 40, you know. And so when they told me 68, I was through the moon.
I love it, man. That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Fantastic.
I know we're over. There's like a couple more questions. Could you hold in for us?
I am fine, man.
We'll do a speed round.
Yeah. Okay. Actually, I have the graphic. It's chow lightning round. Question palooza time. So we're not going to spend too much time on the answers, but just kind of we can touch on these.
Okay.
Yo, you know my man Scott Kurtz. Scott Kurtz is in the building. I think he's still around. Scott says, Taheed, do you feel that investing in building your audience on social media apps like Insta has been worth it?
I think so. I still don't feel like I've outgrown that audience, you know. That kind of, I don't know if it made the strip easier to sell for salesmen or anything like that, or if it even really influenced whether or not I was offered the print deal, but it did make me feel like I was doing something right. It kept me motivated, it kept me invested, and so it's absolutely worth it. And I'm still like really thankful for that audience. It's like the Instagram audience is incredible. Like the whole culture there is super supportive. So
awesome, cool. Thanks, Scott. Bye, Scott. All right, next is our good buddy D. Brad Gibson. D. Brad says, I'm looking at CRABGRASS and your art style appeals to me, but also your lettering. How do you choose lettering styles? Can you speak to that?
My lettering style is a handmade font that is based on the lettering from the comic Zits. It's loosely based on that. I liked the angles of it and the size of the letters and things like that. So I made a handmade font based on that, and that's just what I use now.
That is interesting because David Peterson brought up the Jim Borgman connection. So see, look, all roads lead.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Very cool.
Yeah, if you see it in there, it's probably in there.
It's in there. What's up, Brad? All right, cool. Thanks to you, Brad. And our good buddy Gar Hyde says, did we talk about your Patreon? Do you have a Patreon?
Yeah, I do.
Has that been a successful model for your monetization?
I tell you what, it has gotten me through.
Yeah.
Because the whole development process is a paid process, but it's not much. They give you like $500 a month. And I don't know if I'm talking out of school here, but yeah, we're
all professionals here.
Yeah, you can't live on that. And so the Patreon grew steadily over the course of the development period and has allowed me to like contribute to my household so that my wife didn't have to bear the entire financial burden. And it's still, you know, a very important part of our finances. And so I can't see abandoning it at any point.
Do you feel your Patreon was helped by your numbers on Instagram? Where are your people coming from? Okay,
yeah. The initial glut of people I got came from a Something Awful forum.
Oh wow!
Yeah, a bunch of people there had a thread about comic strips, and it had a bunch of fans, and they all at once decided to just go support my Patreon. Like the day it happened, when I got a message from like the ringleader, and they all came in, and I think it was like 200 or 300 people.
Wow, that's I need some of that myself.
Yeah, I got really lucky, and then, but ever since then, it's been a steady flow of people from Instagram.
Oh wow!
People move out, and then people come in and replace them, and I hover around 600 something people.
Yeah, beautiful. That's a real those are real numbers, and it's a real lifeblood. I think people who haven't really touched on Patreon should really try to give it a shot. Yeah. Thanks, Gar. 2 more. Oh, what did they just come back? Okay. Our good buddy Notorious JRD says, is 150 a magic number to get noted in syndication? So, and you spoke a little bit about that was kind of like your stopping point for some of your old strips. But maybe I can flip this question into like, do you feel like you're building a stamina to be able to be where you are now by doing that volume of work back then?
Gosh, I don't know if I was ever consciously doing that, but probably yes. I felt like I needed to have a large body of work, however I got there. So yeah, I'm thankful that I spent as many hours as I did working on comic strips, and that
Mhm.
all I have to work on now is my speed and not, any other really aspect of creating comics.
Okay, cool. Thanks, RD. And last one, and we'll let you go pee. Super D2 says,
Ringo
What?
nominee. Ringo nominee.
"Oh,
Super D2.
Yeah.
congratulations! What is something you wish you What is something you wish you knew 10 years ago that you know now?"
That it would pay off, just because I would save myself a lot of headaches worrying I made the wrong decision. Like after you spend 20 years drawing comic strips and not really getting anywhere, it starts to feel irresponsible. When all of your comic strip buddies have moved on to different things and gotten real jobs, or they've become successful at comic strips and have this wonderful career, and you're still trying to make it, it starts to feel kind of irresponsible to ask people who care about you to still, be excited about the things that you do, or to muster that excitement yourself. And if I knew that it would pay off, then I could just focus on creating comic strips, and I wouldn't have maybe taken so many breaks, and maybe something would have happened sooner. Who knows?
So
This is kind of a cop-out answer. I wish I would have known everything would be okay.
Right.
you think, like, at a certain point, if it doesn't pay off, then it becomes a hobby, and not that a hobby is a bad thing, but
Right. Well, it is if you're me, because like I put all the eggs in this basket. I didn't have any other eggs left, so it was like I was really, really betting on myself at one point.
Do you think, and we'll get out of here, but I think it's really interesting. How was the support in your life on your way up this road? Because I know there's, like you said, like it starts to feel like, am I even doing the right thing? Were people kind of like cheering you on? Did you have some people that fell back or were like, bruh, kind of getting sick of ramen around here. We'll get some money again. What I mean? Like, what kind of like resistance or pressures were you getting? You don't have to speak too personally to it, but like,
at different points in my life, there've been different levels of support, from different people. Whenever anybody asks me, how do you make it in cartooning or whatever, the first thing I say is get yourself a Jessie, get yourself a wife like mine, who will support you through all of this happily, and just let you focus on your art so that you can actually create art and get somewhere with it. Because I don't know what I would do without her. This just does not happen without her in the picture. And I know because she wasn't always in the picture. My wife and I have been together for 8 years now, but I was married previously, and drawing comics the whole time, and trying to strike the wrong balance to be successful at comics. But Jessie let me just do my thing, and it got us somewhere, and it's I'm real thankful for that. But yeah, other than that, it's just like I think this is this weird thing where people who care about you also worry about you.
Yeah.
And if you don't look like you're a rising star or a breakout success, sometimes they want to temper their enthusiasm for what you're doing. You know what I'm saying? Like, sure, they believe in you. Sure, they think that you're a fantastic artist and you could one day, but also don't put too many eggs in this basket. Also, don't put, don't spend too much resources on this, because you still have to live and you still have to feed your family. And they worry that you're going to just like run yourself into the ground and following a dream that may never happen.
well,
Some people are super supportive and will support you no matter what. Other people love you and are afraid to support you because of that. Other people just think that you could be doing better things with your time and energy.
It's hard too, because in most people don't know someone who is a successful artist or a successful musician, right? If you're a creative person, right? And you're sort of lucky if they do. Like my grandfather was a commercial artist. My My parents were very supportive. But, you know, there's a point at which if you're not a creative person, you cannot always understand that other creative person's obsession.
Right. And it is that. It is absolutely an obsession.
Yeah, yeah. And I know from teaching sometimes, you know, you'll get the parent will come up and be like, oh, my poor son or daughter wants to be, you know, an artist, and like, you know, and I'm like, look, I got a belly. Successful. I'm a successful. I mean, you can be successful, but I think your story speaks of the sustained effort despite setbacks, which everybody has.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of it too is that because people don't understand the process and maybe don't know someone who was successful, they sort of have that Hollywood idea of, you know, the starving artist, or, you know, all these
eating soup out the can.
Right. You know, and that's not really true, but I know it's difficult for people to relate to it, and sometimes it's difficult in relationships because, you know, I've been in relationships where I've been with an artist. I've been in a relationship where I was somebody who was not an artist. Sometimes the artist can understand it. Sometimes the non-artist can understand it, but to a point, because then it's almost like you have another relationship that's taking a lot of your time and will always take a lot of your time, you know? So it can be difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, absolutely. 100%.
And on that note, we're gonna push the button. Taheed, thank you so much for being on the show. I hope we didn't keep you.
No, thank you for having me. This was great. Super relaxing. I was dreading it all day long because I'm I'm super anxious about these kinds of things, and I've had to tell myself that I'm just going to say yes to everything. You know, I don't want to let my anxiety stand in the way of the potential success of this project. So I'm just going to say yes to everything. And if I make a fool of myself, I make a fool of myself. If it goes great, it goes great, or whatever. But it doesn't stop me from having anxiety in the moments building up to it. But this was actually super relaxing and comfortable. You guys.
Well, thank you. You know, we try to make it easy. Yeah. So, you know, and you're among kin, so don't ever worry about it. And we'd love to have you back if you'd like to come back at some point.
I'll come on back any old time. Yeah.
All right. Awesome. And do a plug for your book.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Hold on a second.
Oh, he's got
visual aids.
Well, I'm glad he's got pants on too. That's good.
Yeah. I told you this was the dream, to get my own book and have it on my shelf.
Yes.
CRABGRASS Adventures is launching in bookstores on the 20th or the 27th, whichever. Go both days. You can get it on Amazon now. If you just Google CRABGRASS, or if you just Amazon search CRABGRASS, it'll come up, or search my name, Tauhid Bondia.
I love it.
You can pre-order right now.
Yeah, go cop it, y'all. You know what to do. I love it. Yes. You heard it here first.
My man. All right.
All right, cool. Thank you so much. And for everybody that hung out with us, thank you again. We'll be back here next week, Wednesday, 8 p.m. EST. Hang out tomorrow. I'll be back on the solo tip for Coffee Break with JN at 9 p.m. Same bat channel. And Taheed, you've seen the show. You know how we get out of here, right?
No, I do not. I haven't seen it all the way to the end. I'm not going to lie.
Oh, bro.
The show is long, man. The show is long.
I know. It's good long, Paul. All right, we're going to get out of here. Just follow along. Guys, thank you so much for hanging out with us. And don't forget, we're still in a pandemic, so don't forget to wash those Kirby hands. Put those Kirby hands up. There you go. Nice and flat. There you go. All right, you guys, thanks so much. See you on the other side.
All right.